Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by, holy moly, I just totally drew. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Sarah O'Kelly of Choice Cyber. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Hey, Chris, it is great to see you and connect with you again. How's life been treating you?
Life is good. I feel like the last time we spoke, I was with a different organization, and so were you. This would have been, you were with Onshore Security. This was right near the end of my tenure with the school district. So we're looking at, we're just in that 8-9 month away from that whole world. So you're at what, 5 months now with Choice Cyber?
A little over 6 months.
Nice.
I now know enough to know what I don't know.
Well, that's perfect. Well, before, I will tell you, when you hit that 6 month marker, it's suddenly like, yep, been here a while. But it's that 5.5 months, you're still like, I've only been here 5 months. Don't ask me that question. I don't know the answer. And even if I did know the answer, I'm afraid to give it to you because I might be wrong.
I mean, I feel like that's still a thing that happens.
Sure.
Particularly in the work that we do around helping organizations reach their compliance goals. There's a lot of I have a gut feeling about what my answer is going to be when a client says, hey, here's my problem. But there's also so many compliance frameworks, and every one of them has its own little pesky intricacies. And so I lean really hard into, let me get back to you on that.
Right.
That is I feel like if somebody has all the answers right off the bat, you probably don't want to work with them, because
there's even there's the bigger fear is that the answer that's bubbling up from deep within comes out, right? I think that the world, by and large, everybody is believing in the fact that they're a snowflake. So whatever framework they might need to comply with, obviously it wasn't written for them. So it's immediately it doesn't apply to me. I'm too small to satisfy this. I don't understand when you say compensating control. That just sounds like we're looking at a way around it. And to the way you said that, I like that, because saying I will get back to you by no means implies that you're letting them off the hook. It by no means says that you don't know the answer. It just means that before you explode or the smoke starts to actually come out of your ears, you're going to go count to 10 somewhere in a dark room with your noise canceling headphones.
Yeah. It also, we often think of compliance as something that gets solved by tools. And the reality is that, Alex, our COO, likes to use the phrase a culture of compliance. And it really does extend way beyond what solutions we're using into why are we working towards compliance? How does that affect our business decisions? How does that affect our hiring decisions? All of that has to be in place in order for compliance to really be effective at hopefully protecting the business and setting the business up for future growth. So
I like that. I think that, so it's funny because I was just working with Alex. She helped me redo a slide for I have a presentation that I had to give around the what does it mean to be a mature solution provider? What does it mean to have that business culture change that shows a cybersecurity first mindset? And I go through the different levels, you understand the premise of cybersecurity or security resources, tools, services, etc. And quite honestly, you've done a great job of making sure that the technology uses language like our product has that baked in. It uses security. So we're aware of it and we're conscious of security being important, but we're not necessarily looking at proving it because we're
Mm-hmm.
assuming it's being proven by what we're using. And so then as I stepped through it, it's like tech team does an evaluation based on the needs of company or client that incorporates cybersecurity. So if they don't need it, we don't need it, right? Like we're not going to force this on them. And then as I kind of worked through it, I didn't actually say that. I didn't say compliance is the real evidence that shows that you're a mature organization with regards to cybersecurity. I really like that. I think it's really well said. I also think the other thing that bothers me about compliance is the approach. So lots of frameworks are all about complying with fill in the blank data protection model, and it has nothing to do with security, right? Because what they're really saying is you need to do XYZ because this data falls into this classification of sensitivity and we want it protected this way. Not necessarily the right way, but sort of my way as opposed to somebody else's.
Yeah.
Most solution providers look at this through a different lens altogether. They're looking at, I understand security, a mature MSP understands the premise of security, and they look at it through the lens of, if I get a bigger paint roller, then I don't have to do as much painting. That doesn't mean that it's best for client. It just means it's best for me, the solution provider, because in theory, it's the least amount of overhead from a management standpoint, regardless of what the financial costs are to me or my client, because it's one brush, right? You want a Sonic Wall firewall? Too bad we do Sophos. You want an XYZ firewall? Too bad we do, because it allows me to standardize, but not necessarily for the right reasons, right? So where compliance comes into play, or should come into play, is the ability to provide evidence that regardless of my approach, I meet those data protection requirements, and I may need to adjust my approach so that I don't make it impossible for the client to be, achieve it objectively, right? So with that in mind, compliance is often focusing on the privacy protection, and we've seen a lot of evidence over the years as it shifted from, particularly healthcare, I think kind of did a good job of setting this bar, and the bar wasn't necessarily set very high, but it led with privacy first. And then they realized, as we shifted from a world of pen and paper to a world of ones and zeros, new model, new strategy, new approach, and all of a sudden it's like, we're still using the privacy rule set to make things secure in the ones and zeros space. And that didn't apply very well. And it took us a long time, took more than a decade, right, to see any sort of, here's a new rule set, if you will, on better way to protect the privacy of patient health information. Funny enough, we really haven't seen the maturation. Is that a word? Maturation.
Yep,
maturation.
That's a word.
Yay. Chris should have been word of the day for Chris.
Chris used a big word. Yay.
Right. And I'm so proud of it. Chris needs I need a sticker or something.
I could give you a gold star. I think
that's too much.
Okay, a
but
pink
this
star.
is this is a great shift point, because you mentioned to me, like, hey, if we're going to talk today on MSP 1337, what should we talk about? And you brought up some of the changes that have come about through ISO, some of the additional privacy requirements in the, what is it, net new 11? I think it's 11.
Yep. 11 new controls.
11 new controls. I think a large part of it was tied to cloud infrastructure, but more importantly, it's all about privacy, right? And we're seeing in our industry, or in the, actually more of like the global culture around commerce and retail transactions, just this constant, if it's not front and center, it's in the back of somebody's brain. Like, am I potentially clicking on a link that's taking my credit card? Is this coupon for real, or am I coupon? Either way. So this is if we haven't figured it out, now that we're like 10 minutes in, our conversation for today is about privacy and how compliance and regulatory frameworks, and just frameworks in general, have by and large not really focused on privacy in recent years. It has been all about how do we address things through a security posture. And I think, and the reason you're on today is to talk about, what does it mean now from a privacy standpoint, and why is this so important in 2023?
So I want to take you back 4 years. A lot of the privacy and a lot of the cybersecurity frameworks, and this is a very nascent idea in my head, but I like to connect the dots. We talked a lot about physical security, about data centers, about on-prem solutions. That was the gold standard. We are now in 2023, where the whole world has been shifting to remote work at a much faster pace than it was previously. And we're still looking at frameworks that treat everything as if it's still like, oh, we have to swipe into the data center to be able to access things. That's not the world that we live in anymore.
Right.
And so I think as our compliance frameworks evolve, we're going to see more of a blending of kind of that hardcore cybersecurity tool set along with the business practices and the privacy practices that are captured in things like GDPR or CCPA. Those are going to start to merge. And I think ISO, I was really excited about, wow, this says something about the quality of my life that I get excited. I got really excited about 27001's new revision.
Right.
The last revision, it was 2013 is what most people have been assessing against. 2022 is now out. And some of the controls in there are things that we know are important, but haven't actually talked about prioritizing in our cybersecurity frameworks, like the specific use of threat intelligence, the information security for use of cloud services. But we've also now got this addition of how are we requiring organizations to mask their data leakage prevention. These are pieces that really get into some of the business practices of how are we, as an organization who is looking to be compliant, how are we actually protecting not just our own organizations from a cybersecurity standpoint, but how are we protecting the data that we have on our clients, that we have as part of our vendors?
So doesn't that really get into if you don't know the why or the what, it's really like, I think about, like, don't quote me on the specific safeguard here, but there's a safeguard that literally says, have you defined your security objectives? Like, what are the objectives? And then how are you going to measure success and adapt or change according to that? And, if I recall, having looked at the other day, I actually looked at with Alex some of the new safeguards, and there's a lot of reference to monitoring that wasn't present before. And it's like, well, if you don't monitor something, how do you improve or change or even know if it is working? If there's no, it's like, we're monitoring that VLAN, XYZ VLAN for traffic, and it's like, that VLAN doesn't exist on your network, so why are you monitoring it? Right? Like, it always comes back with 0 because it's not there. But I think, to your point about, like, we're not in the physical space anymore. It's also recognizing the approach that was the physical space and applying it to non-physical infrastructure, right? It's still infrastructure. It still has gated access. We have to remember that it was a physical presence before. And I look at those new safeguards and I'm going, oh, they are taking into consideration, when you think about cloud infrastructure being a big part of the change, that's a big deal, right? Like, I mean, you and I remember when we were at previous company together, like, that's a hard conversation to have when you're talking to someone about an enclave or meeting compliance for a framework. And it's like, but it doesn't physically live inside the four walls that it used to. Now it lives inside of four walls that I'm not even sure I am qualified to understand what they are, right? Like I know I have this thing called an Azure virtual server, but like what does it touch? Like virtual or otherwise, because at some point it does traverse from a virtual world into a physical world, because last time I checked, I'm still created out of physical matter. Was that not a very good question? Uh-oh. I just lost Sarah. I think she was the virtual space just took her away. And now she's back.
I'm back. I'm back. Speaking of four walls, you know, it's an interesting process, the rethinking. And I think folks that are coming into technology now have a little bit of an edge, but a lot of us are still kind of locked into that idea of what cybersecurity means as it was 10 years ago. And
Sure.
And what we're really asking organizations to do now is to consider how they are doing business and looking at it from a risk reduction standpoint and risk mitigation. And those are really challenging concepts for a lot of organizations, especially small to medium-sized businesses. They're not necessarily coming in having already enumerated their risks and figuring out what is the risk appetite of the organization. Even though that's kind of business 101 in terms of like organizational planning, that planning has not extended to information technology.
But I think 101 is a little bit I don't want to trivialize this, because I think about businesses in their inception, the day that we decided to sit down and craft our plan to stand up the LLC or whatever, entity type it was. And think about, and I've probably said this on the show before, or at least in a meeting that blurs into where I've said this, but Jess Mills, J Mills Consulting. Jess is a friend of mine, and actually it's funny, she's married to my former business partner, so we always said, wouldn't it be funny if our wives were to build a business together and be like, wow, it's just like deja vu. Not really, like we know what we're in for. It is a storm, and they're going to issue out all the pain and suffering that we did when we had our company. But she has this like reset model that I love to bring up, because MSPs 10 years into this often aren't looking in the rearview mirror at what they started out to become 10 years ago. And it's not because it's bad. This is not a good bad question. This is a go back and look, and does the mission statement and your core values and the vision of the company still align with who you are today? And if it does, great. It's not a good or bad, but let's just say it doesn't. Well, what's caused that change? Is it because you've started to mature from a cybersecurity standpoint? Is it because you're not maturing and you're not taking, I mean, it could be any number of reasons, but this is an opportunity to reset the needle on your compass to go, look, if I don't line this up with a new north, then I will not be able to embrace the model that we're sort of talking about here, where privacy and compliance and cybersecurity become paramount in my business culture to be successful with satisfying what's in ISO 27001, what's in the new CompTIA trust mark, et cetera. Because if I don't establish that, how are my employees or my clients going to ever embrace that?
Yeah. I think as we go through the compliance journey with clients, it is really fascinating to me to ask them bigger questions. And, a question that I like to ask them is, where's your business going to be in 5 or 10 years? What kind of business do you want to win? What are the contracts you want to be making money off of? Who are your clients? Who are your future clients? Because compliance ideally is about creating a strategic plan for your business to ensure that you can win what you want in terms of work down the road. And, we know with CMMC, at a certain point, you will not be able to bid on a contract unless you're CMMC compliant. And
Right, which raises a really loaded question. Like if your clients are in that CMMC space, I don't think it's just about understanding how you need to potentially be compliant with CMMC, but like to what level? Like where do I fit in this supply chain ecosystem that I can defend, right? Like so someone says you have to be CMMC compliant because that's the mandate that has been given to us, therefore we're giving this mandate to you. And it's like if I am not mature in my cybersecurity culture as an organization, then they're probably right. I need to fall in line like a good soldier and do exactly what they're saying I need to do. But if I have the maturity to go with responding to that question, it's going to be more along the lines of what is it that you need me to comply with specifically, and is what our organization does today meet those requirements, as opposed to I have to reinvent myself to stay in the game.
Yeah. It's the difference between reactive and proactive. You talked about that reset, and in my time as a coach, one of the things that I had people do is take a pause and think about what it is that you're here for and where is that alignment. And I think it's a great we're at the beginning of the year, and this is the time when a lot of us are reviewing our contracts for the year. We're reviewing what services we're paying for. Why are we not reviewing our own business and thinking about, like, is this the direction that I want to go in? And understanding that, simply being compliant is not enough.
No.
Being compliant just means that you've successfully jumped through a bunch of hoops and checked it. But, you brought up monitoring earlier. If you're not paying attention to the alerts, what good is your monitoring? If you're not thinking about how are we looking at this data to determine whether our systems are performing as well as we need them to be, and what do we need to do in order to build capacity for future, then you're missing the point.
Well, isn't that the myth of the world we live in from a technology standpoint? You think about, I read this morning, I was reading TechCrunch, and it was an article that caught my attention because it said something to the effect of, the best offense is a good defense, and then it said is a lie. And I'm like, they teach that in sports, and they teach that in a lot of different things, that the best, offense is a good defense. And I think, to their point, as I was reading through the article, in cybersecurity, I think that is not true, but we've really entrenched ourselves in that myth that says, oh no, we've got all of these tools and services in place to protect and detect and maybe even prevent a little bit, but we're more concerned about if this event occurs, we're on it, right? We're reacting to something that may be too late by the time the alert gets to me. And so their point was, if you have the best offense, it's not necessarily like you're taking this to the threat actors, but what can you do that isn't sit around and wait, wait for them to knock on the door and not open it, but put another lock on it because you're like, oh, they tried the pick method and, well, I put a new lock on it and good luck, right? Because I reacted to the first time they got the door open. So do you think that there's an element of truth to why these privacy safeguards are coming at us in such force? Is that there's a new idea here that says, if you understand the value and sensitivity of the information to be protected, then how do you go about proactively instead of defensively ensuring that it's safe all the time and still meets the criteria of the triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability?
Yeah. I mean, data is king right now. Data is what drives the economy.
It's the currency of today.
It absolutely is. And rather than looking at, have we protected our patents for our machinery, that is important. And also, are we protecting the data around that? Are we protecting our privacy data? Are we, what is actually of value? And
do we even know? I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that the loaded question? I feel like in our industry, for what you're doing and what I'm involved with, it seems like the more conversations I have, it goes back to the roller. The bigger the roller, the
Mm-hmm.
easier it is to paint the wall, right? Because I don't have to dip it as many times because it just covers the wall. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, if I don't know what I'm protecting, then how do I know if I've been successful in protecting it other than the wall is a different color than it was yesterday?
Yeah. And if you don't look at what you need to do in order to mitigate your risks in the future and how you can structure your plans to embrace that, then you're not a mature organization.
Yeah, and I was on a podcast recording earlier today. As I try to get some so I can have a potential week of downtime. And it was an interesting conversation because we were talking about what happens when the incident occurs. And
Mm-hmm.
the point that Robert made was your math formula doesn't scale when it's not 1-to-1. And we're
Mm-hmm.
all in the IT solution provider space, whether we're providing compliance services to other MSPs, we're providing compliance services as MSPs to our clients. And no big deal. And I'm trivializing this a little bit because that's not really true. I mean, it'll be painful if it's still 1-to-1. But to his point and the event that he went through, all of his clients were crippled at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That is a scenario that does not have a scalable math formula to help you get back to the right of boom and surviving that event, because you just can't plan the math formula for that. So
Yeah.
when you think about the data that you're protecting, the larger the roller is, the faster you paint the wall. Potentially, what did you miss? And are you in the right
Yeah.
room? Is it like, because so many of these things, if we limit to what needs to be protected because of what is sensitive. So instead of backing up 20 terabytes of data, you're backing up a 1 terabyte of data for that client, and something happens and you need to restore the data. Well, the time to restore is obviously a lot shorter than if you have 20x the data set. So like, we've got to recalibrate from a privacy standpoint, understanding the sensitivity of data that we're being held responsible for, whether we choose to be
Mm-hmm.
part of that acceptance process or not. And essentially that recalibrate and almost reinvent ourselves to say, if I was in their shoes, what's
Mm-hmm.
important to me, and how do I establish like what might not be considered private or sensitive to me might be to them, and vice versa, so that we're on the same page with what needs to be protected, how we
Yeah.
go about protecting it, and what are we doing to measure that we've been successful. Because when the event occurs, you don't know right away that you failed or succeeded in protecting the data. You just know that an event
Mm-hmm.
has occurred that may have compromised everything or nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality is that I know privacy is kind of a pain in the neck for a lot of people because, GDPR feels very, particularly if you're looking at something from like, oh, well, let's just solve it with this tool. Dealing with privacy regulations is a whole nother animal. Like in my head, often think about privacy frameworks totally separately than I think about cybersecurity frameworks. So like a GDPR requirement is not the same as a NIST requirement, two different
Sure.
animals. But the reality is there are more states that have come out with their own privacy regulations, Colorado, Virginia. There are some other states that are enacting those this year.
Sure.
We're starting to now see the stick and carrot approach to
Yeah.
privacy, which is companies like Sephora got fined massively over simply sharing their data with, I think, Facebook or
Yeah.
somebody. So we're starting to see that there is this focus on overall organizational security in addition to cybersecurity that is getting blended now.
Well, you
Um,
saw that also with T-Mobile, with all of that data that was compromised in
mhm,
their breach, where it wasn't even T-Mobile customers. These were those that had potentially failed on an application to get, pass a credit check so that they could get the free phone or the
Yeah.
pay-as-you-go plan, and they held on to the information when they knew full well that they shouldn't have, or at least not held on to the level of information about those individuals that applied. So I think to your point, the privacy, the compliance side. So I think what changes here is when we think about security frameworks like NIST and CIS and what they are accounting for is more of like, how do I secure me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
largely what the privacy frameworks that we're seeing, GDPR, CCPA, those are about the who is taking in your data, right? So
Yeah.
like whether it's retail or otherwise, that my information, me personally, whether it's healthcare or otherwise, I have entrusted you with my
Mm-hmm.
information to provide better services or better something for me, whether it's customer experience or a better treatment plan because I found out about all the medication I'm taking and I shouldn't be taking them apparently because I got them off of WebMD and now I'm a doctor. Right, like I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, right? We have to do a better job of discerning that as solution providers too. I think
Mm-hmm.
is the reminder, like, take the employees out of the equation for a minute and think about organization, client is entrusting me with stuff that's important to not just them but potentially their employees, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to protect that. Which,
Yeah.
if you think about it, it's the same model that you need to apply to yourself when we're thinking about privacy. We're
Yeah.
just really good at thinking about security and going, again, if I use a big enough roller, everything's going to be
Mm-hmm.
protected.
Yeah. I love it when people say, oh, well, if I get this Microsoft license, then that automatically means that I'm going to be compliant for things. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you can't just, you literally can't do the big roller. And this is, I
No.
think, where the opportunity for MSPs really gets bigger because we're traditionally thought of as we just come in and do the IT. But what we're talking about now, are we talking about compliance frameworks that actually encompass all of the business decisions, all of the business plan? And so it's an opportunity for us to really get the decision makers in the organization at the table and get them to commit to understanding what security really looks like, so that we're not constantly going back to clients with like, hey, we need 10 more seats and we get a pushback. This is our opportunity to encourage them to think about IT as not just a function of their business, but as integral to their business as their sales department.
And that we're not going
As
to get it right every time. And there needs to be
Yeah.
some patience as this model is evolving. I mean, you and I were part of the conversation not so long ago where they had to make the transition from a Microsoft license to another Microsoft license. And we
Mm-hmm.
got all their seats moved over and then found out that we couldn't achieve compliance with what they needed
Yep.
without changing to yet a different license because they were given, I don't want to say bad information, but there wasn't a true understanding of the privacy security model that needed to be
Mm-hmm.
applied in order to satisfy the framework that they were bound by. And I think
Yeah.
that that's easy when there's multiple vendors and there's multiple moving parts, if you will, to get the formula right. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
perfect formula. Our goal is to be able to round up or down, right? Like if we
Yeah.
get close, we get above the 80% marker. We don't need to do the 0.5 rounds to 6, but I mean, like if we can get close, we have to accept that close is good for what we're trying to accomplish with a model that says constantly trying to improve. And let's be clear,
Yeah.
Chris didn't just say we're trying, therefore, let me off the hook because I tried, even
Mm-hmm.
though I didn't do great. I was
Yeah.
trying, right? That's not what I'm saying, right? Like we're saying be prepared for it's not perfect,
Yeah.
to know that you're always going to have to improve and that it's not one and done. And I think I love that you bring up the license. I think we so easily in the solution provider space get wrapped up in, I can't believe you misquoted the client. And now they're going to hold us to the pricing or any number of things. And the reality is that's wrong on both sides because this isn't retail. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
Walmart mispricing, the eggs, right? Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're $2.99 and normally they're $6 because that's a thing. Um, We are not in that world. In fact, even when we are selling something or reselling something to a client, we're doing it because they need us to, not because we're in the business of being a retail shop. If we were, every solution provider out there would have a storefront that's like, go to our website and then hit /store and let me know when you're ready to check out. That's not the world that we are in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a good thing it's not the world that we're in,
Of
because
course.
it really allows us to custom fit for our clients. I mean, the world changes. The pandemic was a great example, but how we do business changes
Yes.
time and time again. Our threat environments in cybersecurity change almost daily. Like we know the vectors, but there's always something new. There's always a new exploit. And with Choice, we do continuous compliance services. It's not just a one and done. We're gonna get your policy set done, and we'll tell you to put these 3 systems in place, and then you're done. That is an ongoing, constantly evolving process.
This is no different than throwing into your phone the directions to a destination and having a construction or traffic accident that throws a wrench in you getting there on time, or having to take a different path. And the reality of that is we're so far into the future of being more consistently right with that model of navigation than we were when we got the gas station McNally Atlas that was printed, 3 years ago. And it doesn't even account for the roads that I could have taken and gotten there either that much faster, or I could have never left where I was going at all, because it happens to be that it was next door. But you couldn't get there before because there was no road.
Yeah. It's, we come back to the reset. We come back to the continuous improvement, the looking at where are we as an organization? How are we servicing our clients today? What could we do better in the future? And that requires us to pay attention to the lessons that are being presented. It requires us to pay attention to the monitor. It requires us to be consistently investigating what's out there. How do we do a better job at bringing services to our clients that are going to meet them where their business is and help them grow for the future? And that is not something that we can just kind of go like, oh, well, I have my MCSE from back on NT4. If I was trying to tell people what to do with their network based on what I learned getting my MCSE, that would be awful. We have to continue to embrace change. And that to me is, compliance it's not just checking the box now, it's taking a forward thinking, what can we do to future-proof our organizations?
Well, I'm going to just say we're stopping right there. We've went over time by just a little bit, but I think, Sarah, you encapsulated the message of continuous improvement, accept and embrace change, and know that there is no final destination, only a pit stop along the way.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week.